All right, it's September 12th, 2022. It's well past midnight. I was just reorganizing some bikes because we just bought this blue bike and I had to make some different space for it. So it's getting really oddly nostalgic about my bikes. And I'm making this video now. I wouldn't be doing this if Shauna was here. She's at work tonight. So anyway, I thought I would just kind of want to document what some of these bikes, the history behind some of these bikes, what they mean to me. First one, I'll go with the age. I'm gonna go with what's the oldest bike. So if you look at the very back of this rack over here, you'll see there's a bike that's suspended from the top up here, and it's not in service. It has no pedals. And the handlebars are turned, and I'm sure there's no air in these tires right now. But I think I rode it probably 3 years ago or so last time. It's a fixed gear I bought in 2005 when I was a bike messenger. Maybe I was messengering in 07 maybe. I think I bought it before I became a messenger again. I was a messenger from 03, 04, 05. Then I stopped messengering and I picked it up again, I think in 06, 07. Anyway, the story I know about Moths is that the guy who owned a bike shop on 17th and 3rd designed this bike, and this is the only bike there is. There's two versions, there's a black and red. This is the black and red. And he only made them for a couple of years. And that guy who designed this bike and had this bike shop, he passed away. And the next owner of that shop on 17th and 3rd was a guy named Carlos. And Carlos, he rented bikes to Bike the Big Apple, which is the company which my good friend Jesse managed and I worked for 10 years. So I worked out of this bike shop on 17th and 3rd where this bike was originally conceptualized. I worked there for about 10 years. So anyway, that's sort of why this bike has sentimental value to me. I hope to never sell it. There's no reason why I would ever sell it. I want to say I paid $280 for it from a guy on Craigslist. I bought it when it was cold out. It's always better to buy bikes when it's cold out. So that's the Moth. The next oldest bike is the Surly. I bought it in 2011. I bought it because I was going to be taking this cross-country bike trip in 2012. So the trip was 4,000 miles, and besides that, this bike has probably had another 4,000, 5,000 miles on it, is my guess. It has a ton of miles. And I just took it on a 3-day bike trip to Poughkeepsie. I just had it professionally cleaned in a bike shop. It's super nice right now. I just oiled the seat. Got some new grip tape on here. These hoods were replaced. It's got this cool side view mirror. What else? It's got this rack here. It used to have a front rack. That front rack is now on that other blue bike behind it. So that's the Surly. The next oldest bike here is this purple Bianchi. I used to work at a restaurant called Mexican Radio. I worked with this guy named Steve. He was from Brighton, England. Steve's wife unfortunately left him, and one of the things she left in the apartment was this bike. So he told me I could have it. So I went over to his apartment in Jersey City. The tires were literally melted they were stuck to the floor. They were melted because it was sitting in front of a radiator for years without moving. It was covered in dust. I still really haven't gotten all the dust off it. But anyway, this became Shauna's bike. So Shauna's had this bike for a really long time, and for a certain amount of years she didn't really ride it too much, but this past starting in the fall of 2021 through the spring of 2022, Shauna had her preceptorship to be a nurse practitioner at Methodist Hospital on 7th and 7th. So this was a bike she biked to work twice a week for that 9-month period. And her shifts were overnight. So she would take this bike, over to Park Slope around 5:30 p.m. and come back at 6 a.m. So that twice a week. So this was a really important bike for her. So the next oldest bike, I think, is this little blue bike. This was I bought it in March 2019. The guy who owned this bike was on Eastern Parkway. I paid $60 for it. It was a Craigslist bike. So Sylvia was getting really good on her balance bike, and I bought her this bike. And the first day she tried to ride it at Lincoln Road Playground, she was able to ride it. So this is where she developed her, bike riding skills on this bike. That same, I don't know, a month later, I bought this cargo bike. This is the second cargo bike I had. I actually had 2 cargo bikes in this apartment for about 2 weeks, so I had to sell the other one. But this is called a Bike Friday. They're kind of hard to find, like used on Craigslist. So I found it. Sam, my buddy Sam, I called him up. I was like, hey, come watch the kids, because Shauna was still at work. Please watch the kids. I got to run and try to buy this bike. So this woman lived on Prospect Park Southwest, so not far from here. So I literally ran over there on like a Saturday morning, bought the bike for $1,000. I would say it was easily worth like $1,500, and it came with a Yep seat on it. So there was a seat for a little kid on here. So Moni sat in the seat there, and then Sylvia sat up front. One of the first things I did was put a trailer hitch on it. So this little hitch here, you can clip that little blue bike to the back of it. So like I would take it to the park, and then Sylvia could ride in the park, because she wasn't quite able to like actually bike from here to Prospect Park. So I used that a bunch. I just used it the other day. So that's the cargo bike. So those were 2019. Then the next, I think in 2020, when Sylvia was getting too big for this little bike, I found this bike on Craigslist. So this guy who was selling this bike lived on Long Island. And this is a time when it was really hard to get a bike because like of the demand for sporting goods, and there was like this whole like COVID economy weird stuff going on. So I was really happy to find this bike. It's called an Isla. They come from the UK. It's like they're like premier like kids bikes. So they're like $500 brand new, which is certainly more than I would pay for, I guess, 5-6-year-old's bike. But I bought it for I think $250 used. So I was really happy to get that. And then so Sylvia rode this for a couple of years, and then this past weekend, Sylvia was like, she outgrew this. Moni was outgrowing this, so I was like, the next thing is Moni's gonna ride this. And then we went to this bike, it was called a Bike Bazaar or Bike Jubilee, something like that, in Park Slope. It was like a bunch of street vendors type scenario. It's like a big bike flea market. So there's like hundreds of bikes, and there's probably the whole hundreds of bikes. There was like, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 bikes that could possibly like be good for Sylvia. And this one was super nice. I really liked the color. It was in good shape. Sylvia liked it. The guy was asking $250. I gave him $200. So this is her new bike. So she rode this bike home, and then I towed this bike on the back of here. Moni wasn't quite ready to ride this bike home because she doesn't really know handbrakes, so she's still getting used to the handbrakes. So I towed that red bike on the back of here. So now I've got to sell this bike, this one, and I'm convinced I can literally get the exact same amount of money I paid for it 3 years ago. So I'm gonna try to sell it for $80, hopefully get $60, literally spend $0 on this bike for 3 years of service. It's pretty awesome. These are my bikes. About the bike rack itself, I bought the bike rack before, like right when we were moving into our first, apartment with the family. So that was like 2014 when Shauna was pregnant. So I had this bike rack at Kings Highway, and it squeezes between the floor and the ceiling with these like little compression bolts. So it started off kind of in the corner over here when we had less bikes, and it slowly like moved over to the left. So I most recently, like this little blue bike was hanging up here on this hook I put up here. And now that we have this bike with 24-inch wheels, I basically had to move this whole thing over 12 inches. So, and I don't really have much more space to work with because this thing is like, the cargo bike is at the very end of the hallway. So it's like, this is the length, and then these two this black bike goes past here. There's very little clearance, like so. These are really close to one another. This black bike is supported. It's being held up by this clamp that I drilled a hole in. So you can see this here. This clamp holds up this bike. It does have a kickstand, but you can't just have like a bike on a kickstand in your hallway. It just doesn't look right. So you want it to be like nice and perpendicular to the ground. And then you can see there's really very little room here too. So like this bike, once the seat goes up, it'll just like barely clear this wheel here. So those are some things I took into account. Probably did a lot of thinking about this, just because I really like this type of stuff. We also have these two scooters up here. So this scooter, we've had this since Sylvia was 1, I think, so 2016. I put this water bottle holder on it. It's a really good conversation piece with people. People really like that. And then we had a yellow scooter from Moni that got stolen. So then we only had one scooter for a while. Then I found this at a yard sale in our neighborhood for $15. It's also like it's a well-used micro scooter, but these things are amazing products. They cost like $80 to $120 and they last like forever. So we have these two scooters. We used to have strollers in here. Got my workbench back here. This floor pump. Got some this clamp holds the bike over to the left, because if that clamp wasn't there pushing the moth that way, it would sort of want to swing over too close to this bike. And I also put these little spacers on these brackets here, so the brackets hit the bike in the right spot. So obviously this video is mostly for me. Who on earth could possibly be interested in all these details about my bikes? But yeah, I love these bikes. And this one's about to go. But it's going to be a good bike for some other little kid. Oh, last thing, this painting here is slowly getting encroached upon, so, it wasn't obstructed. And this is a painting that was in my parents' house. They probably bought this, my guess is in the 70s. It's a Boulanger, I believe. That's the way you say the artist's name. There's also a sister piece to this that's in my parents' house where it's 4 or 5 girls on bikes with they have that long hair. So yeah, this painting was always in the house I grew up in, so it means something to me as well. So.